what I find really intriguing, and this is mostly based on Thomas Molnar, who is a Hungarian philosopher, and I should mention him being here in Budapest now, but also like Voegelin and others, Karl Mannheim, they have done a lot of research on this. But Molnar pointed out that utopia is really the most effective contemporary philosophical and political rhetorical tool. And so how does it work, right? If I'm a utopian, what do I do?
Yeah.
I tell you, you experience a lot of crap right now, right? I'm going to tell you that that's not, you don't have to acquiesce to that. We have to change it. You have to change your life to avoid all of the crap that you're experiencing. And I'm going to show you how that can be done. So here's my version of your perfect life. In fact, while we're at it, let's just not think about your perfect life.
Yeah.
Let's think about the perfect society.
Yeah.
Let's think about an ideal state of all citizens within a nation. We can take this on the global scale. I think that'll confuse it. So, okay, so your nation now has to strive to become this utopia. Okay, so what have I established? So okay, and now I have, let's say, 10 things that we need to do in order to get there. Okay, so Agenda 2030 or zero carbon emission society.
Right.
Let's strive for the zero carbon emission society. Okay, so these are the 10 ways how we get there. Okay, and you're like, okay, yeah, so, okay, okay, I have to take shorter showers and I have to buy an electric car and I have to, okay. And most of these things, come from me. I'm telling you what to do. Buy an electric car.
Right. Eat less meat.
Take shorter showers. Don't eat any meat. What are you talking about?
Don't eat any meat. Okay.
No meat.
Right.
Okay,
no meat.
Only cold showers.
Okay.
So now you do that, and you're struggling, right? So you're sacrificing something because the car is expensive, and you kind of like meat, and you kind of like warm showers, right?
Right.
And you kind of like not always taking public transport, but actually having the freedom of being able to take a car whenever you want it, wherever you want it,
right,
without it breaking down after 15 months because the battery's empty. Okay. So what has happened effectively? What effectively has happened is that I changed your way of life based on my understanding that I sold you of an ideal society. Okay, now,
yeah.
I want to add something to this.
Yeah.
Nobody, once this motion is in progress, nobody talks about if that ideal society is actually reachable at all. Because politicians have agreed on this. Agenda 2030, we need to go to this end goal now, or zero carbon emissions. Like, this is now our goal. Nobody discusses this. This is where we need to go. And like, is that one question? And this is very much in the word utopia, right? The no place, the no not reachable place.
Right.
So is this actually realistic? But then also, will we ever get there?
Okay, so I have some questions for you on this, if I may. So when someone posits utopia and they attempt to discharge their impulses in public policy, are they claiming that notion is rationally derivable? Because if it's rationally derivable, then it's universal to all peoples in all times. Are they claiming that that's rationally derivable? Like, I'm also thinking in the back of my mind of either a kind of negative utilitarianism where we attempt to alleviate suffering, or Richard Rorty's contingency, irony, and solidarity. I'm thinking about whether or not, or do they just eschew reason altogether? Are the principles of utopia rationally derivable? That would, to me, be the key question. Are they univocal?
Those are different questions, but they have to at least be under the guise of being scientific. And this is what most of the modern ideologies eventually claim. Gender ideology claims to be scientific. It goes beyond biology, but it claims to be scientific. Climate change ideas or ideology claims to be scientific. It all claims to be scientific. So
okay.
It assumes that role. If it is scientific, that's a different question.
Just rewind the conversation. How is rationally derivable and univocal? How are they different? Because if it's rationally derivable, then people speak in one voice about what the truth is.
I think very few people actually would use words univocally, or they use them too univocally. But I just don't find that helpful, because
okay.
Rationally derivable has something to do with the human capacity to to be logical, right? To be based on the logos, and the logos goes beyond the human capacity of understanding truth. It is truth. Whereas univocal pronouncements always have the danger of being, well, one-sided. That's the essence.
Yeah.
So I'm a big fan of,
Okay.
Yeah.
I got that distinction. Okay, we're good now. Okay, so the problem is that you have people in positions of power making pronouncements that align with their conception of utopia that are, I wouldn't say dystopian, but they're not, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but they're not rationally drivable. They ask you to sacrifice something, usually for the greater good. Is that it?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
But also for yourself, right? And it's, so yes, I think you're right. And the question, though, is what effectively happens is it doesn't matter if the goal is reached. What is successful now in the politician or in the whoever makes these claims, in the scientist or the think tank leader or whatever, the World Economic Forum, and what is successful now is that you've already changed your life because you're already driving the electric car, you're already taking cold showers. So it doesn't matter if you get there. And that's where my question is, do these people really want to establish a utopia, or do they just use the utopia as an illusion to lure people, and luring is a strong word, possibly, but to convince people of their own goals? And then an additional question that goes along is like, well, what profit do they get from it, right? And this is, I mean, these are the politicians that, as we say, right, preach water and drink champagne.
I was literally just thinking of like Gavin
private
Newsom.
jets, but want us to go on. So it's an automatic then separation of like the few, well, let's use the word elite, members of the elite that preach a utopia for the masses, but they themselves not adhere to. And they understand, they know intuitively that they can't, because if they cannot use cars anymore and rely on everything that they condemn as a rhetorical tool, then, well, they can't run their campaigns. They can't be elected anymore. They cannot spend the money in the way that they do and want, and they effectively will not have a good life.
Is it just part of the human condition that we have these, impulses toward?
Yes. Yeah. That's exactly the key question. It is great to talk to a philosopher about these things, I must say this, Peter. Yes, it is. That you live in a crap state is part of human nature. But that then there are two questions. Number one is, okay, so if it's universal, then it is part of human nature. So there is a definitive human nature. That's number one. But the second is is it realistic to ever get completely out of all crap? And I would say it's not. Now, again, I'm a Christian, so for me it's easy. We call this original sin.
Right.
So our life is tainted. But you can also, you don't have to use that kind of vocabulary. You can just say, well, we're imperfect. We strive to perfection, but we're imperfect. So the strive for the perfect state is human. I agree with you. What I don't like is if that strive is hijacked and is being changed to ideals that I didn't actually want to get to, and then that's sold to me as the goal of society. Right. It's like if you sell me a utopia where you say, you should live, you can have your property, you can form a family, right? Find your wife on your own terms, have children. Okay, that's a pretty good utopia. But that's also not a utopia, that's just reality.
So if you didn't want to get to them, the argument then is, there's something wrong with your reasoning. Like there's something like in Plato's Theaetetus. Like there's just something, like you're starting with an original, like there's something wrong with you. Because we, the people who know utopia, we know utopia. And if you don't agree, then, but the problem is not merely epistemological. The problem would also have to be moral.
It feeds off the individual suffering. That's what's so dangerous.
Exactly.
It feeds off suffering is undeniable.
Exactly.
And this is a fact. We all suffer. And
sound like a Buddhist.
I take truth where truth is found, right? So doing that with Albert the Great. But
that's a great life way to live by the way. That's good. Yeah.
So I would say that the suffering is undeniable. and unlike the Buddhists, I would say suffering is real. It's not just an illusion.
Yes, I agree.
So the suffering is undeniable, but and I mean, I think this actually merits some kind of extra commentary, considering that in this kind of social media environment that most young people especially live in, they always think that all other people don't have suffering, only they have certain suffering, right? And this is what makes them vulnerable, which is interesting because they become isolated in thinking that they're the only ones that have this anxiety, that have the angst of life, and they have these uncertainties, and they're really not sure about themselves. Okay, so that makes them vulnerable. This is a different question. So we all have the suffering, we all have the anxiety, we all have some kind of physical ailment, but that's most of the time not what we talk about. And it is actually very helpful to walk through a city and think like, okay, I wonder if this guy has a knee problem, or I wonder if this guy has needed a hip replacement, or I think this guy has hearing loss, or this guy is maybe blind on one eye. You don't know that. You can't always see that, right? Or has a severe mental condition. And so so again, there's the diversity in a certain way, right? So the diversity is natural, and the diversity is also in suffering, but that suffering exists is something natural. So, sorry, going back to the main point, this is a slight diversion, but going back to the main point is the suffering is real. The question is, what do political figures, politicians, or representatives propose as a solution? And this is where I feel the left is very good of clothing their own solutions in very positive language that you can barely disagree with and not look like a complete moron, right? It's like, well, we want a better future. And you can't really disagree with that. Or we want a just society. So you put me, the left puts me in a position where I have to say no. Because what you mean by justice is not justice.
Right. Okay, so I would say not moron because that means you're stupid, but I would say some kind of a moral word. Like a bad person, like equity, diversity, inclusion. You don't want safe space. You don't want whatever. You're somehow, there's something morally awry.
That's right. You are the one that, you are the violent one. You're the one that inflicts, injustice. You're the one, the perpetrator. You are the,
That's the switch from the epistemological to the moral for those who disagree.
That's precisely right. And that's what's so frustrating. And I mean, the conversation is happening, right? People realize, okay, well, social justice is not actually justice. If we mean by justice, what Plato, what Aristotle, what Aquinas, what even Locke and Mill meant by justice.
Exactly.
It's not the same. So, and that's the conversation is happening, but it's very difficult to make that public and to do that in a public forum because, well, you have to think in order and to follow this reasoning. And oftentimes politicians, most of the time, they don't invite us to think, but rather to vote for them, which is a different aim, right? So they're not very Socratic, to go back to you. But
thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. This falls under the umbrella of my nonprofit, National Progress Alliance. Your generous donations keep us going and help fuel content like this. We truly appreciate your support. Thanks again, and we'll see you in the next one.